26, glad you could all make it. My counterpart in crime is not here. I shouldn't say that, I don't want to get impeached. Maria Garcia Berry, but she'll be back next month. Zach's filling in for her today, in addition to his other duties. Before we start with introductions, I want to bounce it to Liz, who has a very special recognition.
So, I don't know if you guys know, but last week was Betty Cram's birthday. So, I have a special, this is supposed to be like a birthday cake. It's cookies stacked on top of each other. So if we could all sing happy birthday to Betty, that would be wonderful. So, here we go.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Betty. Happy birthday to you. Estas son las mañanitas que cantaba el rey David a las muchachas más bonitas.
Happy birthday, Betty.
She just said it was okay if I said how old she was. Betty Cram last week turned 97 years old. And I think that you should be proud of announcing that. Yeah, we love you, Betty.
Thank you. So we'll proceed. Yeah, we do love you.
Yes, we do.
Just to confirm it. So let's start with introductions. We'll go this way.
Good evening, Tychus Holloway, Executive Director of the Mayor's Office in National Western Center.
Hi, Brad Dotson, Deputy Director for the Mayor's Office of National Western Center.
Hi, Jules Kelty, ED of Focus Points.
Carrie Atia with visit number.
Jocelyn Hiddle with CSU.
Liliana Flores Amaro representing Swansea as well as the Authority Board.
Anna Elizabeth Gloveville.
Marissa Urdialis, Family Environmental. Kayla Birdsong with the Grow House.
And I'm Betty Cram, and I just don't look backwards, I look forward.
Yeah.
Here, here.
John Zalpian, Gloveville.
Liz Adams, National Western Center Authority.
Zachary Sanfilippo, CRL Associates.
Julia Spalding Beagles, Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Sorry for being late.
No, you're just on time.
CAC time.
CAC time. That's how we roll.
Yes, I'm Michael Mieta with the Urban Land Conservancy.
Step away from CP time. I'm such a bugger tonight.
Brett Michaels and Corral Creek Consultants.
Diane Pena-Kerbesh with the Wind Turbine Project at Garden Place Academy.
Reggie Newbiner with the Denver City Attorney's Office.
Tasha Hill with Denver Urban
The
Gardens.
excise and license thing.
Lance Nading, Denver Police Museum Development Group.
Well, thank you everyone who showed up. We really appreciate it. We'll start with partner updates. CSU.
Thank you. So you have a whole slew of updates from us on the agenda, including that we have hired an exhibit designer to help us to make sure that the educational experiences that we're going to create in our three buildings are kind of unified across all three, so that there's a coherent story that gets told as you move through them all. And also, for those of us who don't know how to make things whiz-bang and super cool fun for kids, we need to bring in the big guns. So we're excited to have an exhibit design team on board. Lots of different community-oriented things that you can see there. The one I'll just mention is that a bunch of us are going to be participating in the Greenway Foundation's cleanup and park work at Carpio Sanguinetti this coming Saturday, the 28th. If you would like to join us, please let me know. There are still spots available, and we'll all be meeting at Carpio Sanguinetti at 8 a.m. on Saturday to do a variety of different things with them. And our contractor, J.E. Dunn, is bringing a whole bunch of people as well. So come on out and get your hands dirty on Saturday morning. Thanks.
I would be interested in there being more revealed about that, because this is quite a very significant element of this campus throughout. And there's so many different ways to approach the interactive elements. And a lot of my impulse to know more is informed by being in the mix when Space Odyssey came into its initial iteration. And there was a very serious conversation about exhibit design. And in the course of the CAC discussions, early on when the sort of grand exploratory, we said that's a name of a particular way. But there was a lot of conversation. There's lots of ways to go about that in formal and informal education. So I kind of would like that to be a forward conversation with the group, especially for people that are interested in education. Can that happen? Can we meet the group? Can we see what's
potentially? We have not even had our first meeting with them yet. So let me get a sense of kind of how they are thinking about what their process typically looks like, and whether it already includes that kind of iterative work with a group like this or with others who are interested in the educational piece. And I'll come back to you with some more info, and then we can talk with them about incorporating it if it doesn't.
Okay, and then I think that would be great. I mean, I don't know if other people are interested. I kind of hope they are. But the other thing is with the event with Carpio Sanguinet Park, the Aaron Pond Heller Carpio Sanguinet Park, how have you engaged the residents in proximity?
That's a Greenway Foundation event, so we are joining in on an event that they are already hosting. We're just coming as volunteers. So I don't know how they have been doing outreach, but they do, events up and down the river. I just think this one happens to be up at Carpio Sanguinet this time.
So the reason I'm posing that question is I hope all partners can pose that question when we partner, even with other foundations, and that's how these things are built. And so that, I'm putting you on the spot, I know, but I really ask people to do that, because it is part of what prevents regionalism relative to what is happening here, and keeps the drumbeat for people to be engaged in proximity to a park that is really going to be a service to the neighborhoods that are going to come across the bridges and to Globeville itself that's over there. So by way of just awareness, I would request that.
Any other questions? I think, Carrie? Nope, no dates?
No.
Sorry.
The M&S.
Oh, Museum of Nature and Science. Thank you.
Sure, I'll just share that our Extreme Sports exhibit is now open, and it's free with museum admission, and Sunday's a free day. So if you want to spread the word, Sunday's a great chance to come to the museum for free and also see Extreme Sports.
And I think we have a short update from Diana.
Hello, again, my name is Diana, and I am the project manager for the Wind Turbine Project at Garden Place Academy Elementary School in Globeville. And I just distributed a half-page sheet that I wanted to make you all aware of. We're doing the fundraiser to cover parts and any labor, and also my time on this project. We just got an MOU signed with the school and with a representative from Northeastern Junior College. And so the only other item that's missing is the funding to cover all of this. And it's a 5-stage project. The first phase is to get the wind turbine connected, and there's some subsequent work that needs to be done. If you are interested in more details, you can reach out to me. But if you or anyone that you know can contribute to this project, the website address for Facebook and for the GoFundMe is provided on this half sheet for you. If you have any questions, I can quickly answer for you. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Thank you.
None, really? Not one? Okay, thank you.
Count it as a blessing. So we're going to move on to the Authority Board Member Report. John and Liliana.
I just have a quick update, not much of an update from the Community Benefits Committee. We've been doing some learning sessions, learning about Anchor networks, and Anchor institutions. And so when we're ready to bring some more information about that, when we share it back to the board, we'll make sure that we get it to the CAC too. And then I just have an announcement to make. I shared with the board earlier today, but my term actually ends in December on the authority board. And it was a very tough decision to make, but I'm not putting my name in the hat again for another term. And there's a good reason for that. I'm expecting, and thanks. Yes, exactly. So I'm super excited, and so that means that other things in life have to wind down a little bit. So obviously, you all have been part of this project for many, many years, and so I'm going to count on all of you to help us find a replacement. For me, it's up to the mayor to appoint that person, but obviously, the more names we can suggest and put forward to replace me. So it's not a goodbye. I'll still be connected. I'll still be involved, but just in a different capacity. John.
Do you have any input, John?
Not a whole lot. Is Brad going to be here?
Brad's not here, but I'll be making a little bit of a report later. I can share
Okay.
about the SIP and stuff.
Actually, the meeting we had this morning was rather interesting in the fact that
You got to put the microphone near you.
there was a broad array of subjects that were addressed. I think some of the people here will be able to elaborate more in detail than I can on it. So we are ready to take the next step, I believe, insofar as moving along with the project in its entirety. Sure, how's that?
That's
So
great.
what the following reports they will fill in more in detail than I can on this. But I do want to make an informational announcement. Last Tuesday the 17th, we had our first meeting on the bridges. The bridge from Betty Cram, the bridge at 51st, at the downtown office of the Art and Venues office. They're going to be in the process of selecting some artists for the bridge work. It's about $1.5 million for both bridges that'll be available. Eric Anderson was there at that meeting. He's not here, but it's pretty exciting from the fact that they are really listening. It's a good feeling to have people finally listen to after 50 years. So I'll have a more detailed report on the bridges later on because we're just starting on that right now. As that comes along, I think it's November the 4th, we're going to try and get a list finalized for the artists there. Okay?
John, is that RFP already out for the artists?
It's going out. It's going out next week, I believe, yes.
Any questions for the authority board members?
This one might be a little
Okay, now I have a good mic.
there.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Liz, you're doing the role of Brad tonight?
I thought you
Oh,
were
no,
gonna-
I skipped something.
Yeah, well, you're going to skip ahead, I think.
Sorry, I skipped the future of the CAC because that's the next thing that's on here. And it really shouldn't be listed as the future of the CAC because we're actually talking about a different topic, but related. And Zachary has more to say about that.
Thank you, Terrence. So for anyone that does not know who I am, my name is Zachary Samplovo. I work at CRL Associates. So everyone should have been passed out a outline document that says the NWC-CAC 6-year report outline. If you don't have it, there's one on the counter over there. So what this document is, I have 30 minutes on the agenda, and I kind of want to do a hard stop at that, just because we have other things to get to. But this particular outline is an outline for a document that we are thinking of crafting and putting together. And so we really wanted to bring this particular outline document to you to kind of start some initial conversations and to get some initial feedback. I kind of have three goals for the half an hour that we have here today. First is to kind of help you guys understand the thought process of why we decided to write this particular report. The second is to get any feedback or comments or constructive criticism on the outline that is in front of you. If there's things that need to be on it that aren't, for instance, if I've missed anything, if I've included something, or if there's something on there that you don't feel needs to be, kind of comment on that as well. And the last section is regarding improvements that the CAC can make in terms of how its operations are going. If you feel like there is something that needs to be done differently, or if there needs to be improvements that can be made, just kind of getting your feedback on that. So initially,
Can I jump in? Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, of course, please.
Wait, just to put an emphasis on this, this is not a full throttle discussion about what the CAC will be in the future or will not be in the future, who will be on the CAC or not be on the CAC. This is really a discussion about historically where have we been and what have we done, so that everyone is on the same page about what the CAC has done in the past, because we have a lot of new faces, a lot of new names, and not everyone is necessarily on the same page about the history and the purposes of the CAC, because we've been around for 6 years now. I mean, it's hard to believe we've been around for a good little bit, and sometimes it's good to take a step back and remind everybody about how we got to where we are, and that's the basic premise behind this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So to not put too fine of a point on Terrence's point, this document is a working draft only. It is not a binding document. Nothing is set in stone. Nothing is concrete. This is really just to begin initial conversations about kind of what the history of the CAC has been. It's primarily a memorialization document to chronicle where the CAC has come in the last 6 years. So how we got started, who's been on it, what projects the CAC has done, kind of the things that we've taken on as a body. So it's primarily meant to be a kind of chronicling document, and really could kind of inform people that may have not been around for the last 6 years, kind of what the CAC is. It's kind of meant to be a report for the general reader, kind of underscoring who we are and what we've done, and so on and so forth. Yes, questions?
Don't.
Microphone. I got it.
Okay.
I don't have a specific question. I've got a lot of concerns, and I don't want to throw them all out here today.
Sure.
Because we don't have enough time. But I think we need to recognize what we've done and where we've come from. And I look around and I see some new faces. I think some of the old faces have either dropped off or they've just aged in the process. But those of us that have vested interests and are determined to see them through, and I feel that it's important that everybody understand that this body, the CAC, is the heartbeat of this effort. Without these efforts in the past that we accomplished, we would not be where we are today. And that's not a bragging right, that's just a bare fact. And we did some tremendous things, and I think we have a lot more to do. This body needs to shift gears now and redetermine ourselves as to what we're going to be doing and how we're going to do it and who's going to be able to do it. I feel, as I said, it's a heartbeat of this whole thing. It's also the eyes and ears of the neighborhoods and the agencies as to what's going on around here and how it's going to affect our efforts and the National Western Center's efforts. So I think it's great that we're taking this on. We need to redo it, upgrade it, but we can't abandon those basic principles on how we got started. We are the eyes and ears and the heartbeat of this institution. Thank you.
Of course. And absolutely, John. I think that just so you know, this document is not meant to dictate what the CAC is going to be. It's not meant to even suggest what kind of form it's going to look like. I think that will really be a more robust discussion of all the members in this room about what changes the CAC may become, if any. If we decide that the CAC is just fine the way it is, it may remain the same. If there are improvements to make, we might do that. But this document is not meant to in any way lay out any of that. The only thing it is meant to do is to really be a historical chronicle of what the CAC has been for the last 6 years, and then in the last section, offer some feedback of what you guys would like to see for its improvement. So definitely not a binding document in any way.
Can I ask what triggered this?
Yeah, absolutely. So what really triggered wanting to create the report is obviously we're kind of moving in or out of the procurement phase for phases 1 and 2, and phases 3 through 8 are really going to start coming up. And it seems to be a really good opportunity to look at the CAC and see if there was areas that we wanted to improve in, if we wanted to reinvent ourselves, if we wanted to reiterate ourselves in a different way to be more focused on the community. I think kind of the more immediate reason behind it was that there had been a lot of misunderstandings or miscommunications about what the CAC is and what we do. And we wanted to have a document that we could point to and say, hey, this is what we've done for the last 6 years, this is what we've accomplished, this is who we are, so on and so on and so forth. Okay, yes, I have your microphone.
I want to pass that around.
We'll just do a Zen piece here.
Yeah.
So I have one sort of structural question. Is this order malleable? Just the order of what you've got here?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have suggestions on the order of it,
So-
I'm happy to take
I appreciate, Terrence, you clarifying the way it was presented on the agenda. I think that's a real important clarification that we're not taking on. This is not the future of the CAC conversation. I do feel like there has been, you're naming a couple of things that triggered, I guess was the word, this, but I think that there's been a long desire on the CAC for a conversation that has to do with taking a close look at the CAC, both everyone individually and what the CAC brings to this and can bring. So I really want to enlarge it because I really also don't like to hear terminology that says, do we, I don't want there to be any terminology that implies we haven't done something when we have in fact done something or done things as a group, as a project that are constructive in the direction, and it may not be general knowledge as a group and a dynamic. So there's been ways that neighborhoods have been engaged, there's been ways that constituencies have been engaged, and there's been some really successful things that we can now document as responsive to the best concerns of the constituency neighborhoods, for example, that are showing up in the design and the implementation of this project. And I want to go into any conversations with that straight up front in the conversation, because I do think those can be quantified and documented, and so I want it to be a positive, any conversation to be a positive forward-looking summary of what the building blocks are, and partly to echo what John is saying too. This is a very positive legacy, and I'm not really interested in doing anything defensively, that there's misunderstandings or this, that, and I do not want that to be a precipitator. I think there's a lot of really righteous devotion that's gone into this, going all the way back to when the concept came up in 2011, and the people in the city that decided to do this had no idea how it could possibly be done. I'm sure glad I didn't have anybody's job, and there's a lot of jobs I'm glad I don't have. So, but anyway, so I just really want to put a posture of great self-respect on this conversation. I'm not interested in having a assessment of what has happened in the course of this effort that diminishes in any way that what has been done here has been doing the impossible, for one thing. And that can certainly embrace lessons and going forward and that kind of a thing. So I just want to make that strong statement on behalf of this. And I'm skittish about institutional documents. I'll give you one clue. I don't like, I would rather have the prosaic and the substantive at the top of the documents rather than simplistic lists of statistical contacts, you know, like as a fact sheet. Or, you know, I don't, you know, the qualitative progress, the qualitative dynamics to me are much more informative, inspirationally, even going forward, and for lessons than, I don't want it to be, I don't like these institutional documents that are more mechanical. So we can talk about that more later. I mean, this I understand is an outline, as you say. So anyway, I just want to go on record with that as an emphasis, partly in preparation for us being able to really dig deep in a way that we're really supporting what the constructive dynamic of this has been, because I think it can be a good lesson even for the National Western Center is presented as a model for even other arenas in the world that might want to do this type of thing. So I think every step of the way, the full assessment, the full evaluation can be done from a point of view of it's extraordinary to even get this far. And it'll just build it forward in a way that really reveals why the partners are the partners, why now, and all of these things that you're talking about in here. So anyway, I just want to put that on the table for the discussion going forward.
Sure, thank you. Please.
Oh.
Betty, go ahead.
I'm not sure what I was going to say now, but anyway, I remember this.
Uh-oh.
But anyway, what I think is part of the problem that they've had lately is that we don't include the neighborhood enough. When we were just the stock show and in our area, there was always the kind of work that you wanted to have, and we always worked with the neighborhood. In fact, when I had one of the doctors to have one of my babies, and it just we need a good neighborhood, and I think that could be worked on a little. I don't know how.
Man,
So,
somebody else?
no, go ahead, John, and then we can go back.
Hi, I introduced myself, but my name is Tasha. I'm with Denver Urban Gardens. I think this is really cool. I think a lot of organizations, I don't know if this is going to be distributed, but I think a lot of organizations in the area would like to have this just so that they can see where the National Western Center is going and how they can fit in. Especially like, I'm a really big fan of like physical documents, so like having something, you know, like it's easy to download, but like, I don't know, like a book, like not a booklet would be really helpful as just a great resource for a bunch of different reasons. And then the other suggestion I had is about the fact sheet. The only thing, and I'm sure you're planning this already, but just make sure that your statistics are meaningful. I know these are just examples, but 200 meetings just means that there were 200 meetings. It doesn't really say like what got done in those meetings or how many people were there.
They didn't mention the fights in there.
Or the fights. Yeah, we should put fights on it. That's a joke, but so stuff like that. And then also just like talk about like how you got to those statistics, just so that we know that the community knows that they're credible. It's like just trustworthy. So
Thank you.
May I?
Oh, please.
Okay, next step. I'm just ready to go. We got to get this thing in high gear because, as I said, it's the heartbeat of this effort and the eyes and ears for the community. So, a guy a lot wiser than me said at one time, if we don't look to see where we've been, how do we know where we're going? So we need to do that, and I'm anxious to get started on this and want to set some time in the near future to shift gears and get it going. So you got some kind of a time frame we're going to be looking at?
So I think ideally what we would like to have is a draft of this particular report sometime in late October, November, end of the year, ideally is what we're kind of aiming for. So we're going to try and move as quickly as possible. I think it'll be a lot of data collection and a lot of story collection and a lot of research to make sure that we get everything right and to make sure that we capture the entire full history of the 6 years. Yeah, 8.
Yeah, here we go. I'm passing the mic.
So, Tasha, I want to respond a little bit to what you're saying. So, and good to see you. There are hard copies of the master plan at the Valdez Perry Library. We've got a tradition of putting out hard copies. There's a hard copy of the framework agreement. It's been a long-standing commitment of this project to have hard copies and to circulate. And I think it's incredibly important for people coming in with new awareness to recognize these things so we don't reinvent the wheel, and also to create good relationships with our constituency neighborhoods. I myself feel like there has been more done, and it needs to be recognized than people typically do, especially from organizations that have their own with engaging with the neighborhood. I was one of the people on the front lines, as was John Zappian, at the 2C election, where we were, the initiation of this project was thousands of conversations with constituents. And it remains as a sort of nation awareness in a very mixed population. So I think not just organizations, but I think everybody, all the individual constituencies, transcendent and inclusive of organization, deserve and can resonate with what can be issued from this project. And within our partners, the museum, the CSU, etc., there are tremendous things that are also on the ground level that are engagement points with populations. You echoed some of my concerns about the statistics, so I'll ring that bell with you. I'm not interested in these summary statistics as much as I am, this is exactly what I was saying, the substantive conversations that happened, what was generated and that kind of thing. I'm not interested in putting overbearing accountabilities on the demographics of a set of measurable folks. I just really don't want to go there in the climate of such enthusiasm for such a broadly rolling out project. I think we've come way. I think we've come far. I think we've come, well into this. So I welcome and appreciate you, and I just want to say, there's a lot that I think that you're going to discover are those things, and let's get those up on the scaffold too as we build this out. And I'm with John. If we're going to do this, let's go forward and do it in a comprehensive and creative way.
I just one more thing.
Sure.
Maya, please. I was just thinking while Amy was speaking, and I look back about some of the things that brought us together. Maybe you ought to consider somewhat of a social event, kind of a gathering of whoever wants to be there from here in the past, and hopefully attract some people in the future. And another side of this, this job makes you awful thirsty too. So a social hour would be really.
Thank you.
Amen for that.
Yes.
And someone behind you, please.
Hello, I don't know how many of you have heard about I Am Denver. It's the storytelling, and I've participated in it personally and an organization I work with. Basically, I Am Denver, they bring people together and they facilitate some instructions on storytelling. They videotape it and podcasts of all the storytelling. I think the CAC would be a perfect storytelling process. So think about it as a way to get people to come out, talk about their experiences in the CAC. I think it would be pretty good.
Thank you.
Project.
Thank you,
Kayla?
Mike.
Want to pass that over to Kayla?
I think that's a great idea, Michael. And is anyone here from History Colorado tonight?
They're not here.
So History Colorado does that, and they're a partner. So actually, I think that that would be really great to talk to them as far as their involvement. And I just wanted to note on the topic of kind of having the narrative versus the numbers of the metrics. I think that every single person has, you know, either they're really gravitating towards numbers or they're gravitating towards the story. And every person's different, and it's really important to have both and have them reflect each other. So I would be in strong support of having both and having them really tie together nicely, so that if you're someone like AE who doesn't really care about the numbers, and I'm with you there, as much as kind of that story and like what was accomplished, the narrative, but really being able to cater to both kind of mindsets, I think is important. And then I just wanted, this is like general feedback.
Yep.
So I've been on the CAC for almost 2 years. And so I have kind of that newer member perspective. And I've now seen lots of other folks join the CAC, and I've thought of a couple things that would be really helpful.
Sure.
So one is actually having a chance to do a formal introduction. I don't think that we really do that beyond like name and organization. But you all don't know anything really about like why I'm here or anything about me, even though I've been coming to the meetings for 2 years. So that's one thing. And then also doing some kind of orientation for new members of how we participate, what to expect at meetings, how we communicate, just kind of something to think about like onboarding as part of the process.
Thank you. Liliana?
Maybe this was part of the plan, but can you share a little bit more about how you envision like this beyond timeline? Like what's the process
Sure.
for getting to this place, and who is going to be involved in those conversations? and
So honestly,
work sessions?
it's a very open-ended process at this point. This particular outline was kind of, I took inspiration from actually the National Western Center master plan in terms of just creating a rough outline. I think there'll be a lot of research on our parts, and I think that it will probably include, at least I hope it includes interviews with people that have been on the CAC for years and years and years, in addition to going over historical records and historical documents to get as much as full of a picture as we possibly can about the last 6 years. That being said, I think the process is going to be very iterative, and it might change over time, and what I said might completely not be entirely true. I'm not sure if we've thought that far ahead in terms of how the process will be accomplished. This is just kind of an outline of what we hope to gain out of it, I suppose. I think the process will hopefully come quickly, obviously, since we want to move quickly on this, but I think it'll come down the road. And then what was your second question? I apologize.
I think it was that. It was just the process and
Yeah.
who would be involved.
I think we want as many people involved as possible, because obviously speaking for myself, I haven't been here for 6 years. There's people that have been here for 2 years and 4 years and for the entire time. And so I think it'll be an invaluable tool to make sure that we have all of those perspectives wrapped up into this particular document. Absolutely. All right, we have about 10 minutes left. Were there any other comments, critiques, constructive criticism on either the outline of the outline or improvements that you guys would want to see for the CAC going forward, areas of improvement that you guys had? Kayla?
Okay, Kayla.
Well, I want to echo what Betty was saying about having neighborhood residents involved, and I've been thinking a lot recently about when we ask people who are not working for an agency to come to things like this, is it fair that they are not being paid to be here, but I am being paid by the Grow House to be here? And I would encourage us to think about that and think about how we can really authentically have
neighbors at the table and compensate them for their time to be here. And then can we do Google calendars?
Okay.
This thing about pay and constituencies and that kind of a thing, I think is a universal element of discussion. But I don't want to create a hierarchy with anything of that nature in a commit. This sort of an advisory committee is very unique relative to this type of project, which I hope everybody, whether it's in this document or any other way that's been engaged with this, will do whatever they can to help capture what is going on here. But I feel like there's so many points of entry for the constituents that are directly impacted by this in this project that I really hope we can move to an emphasis working with the partners, which are activating so many incredible things here, about bringing in constituents from vast ranges of the constituency to be engaged that have already got an engagement in the National Western Center, because there's this kind of laconic concept of outreach in the neighborhoods that I'm becoming less and less satisfied with. I feel like people, there's so many things that are going to flow. There's education entry points, there's agricultural education, there's agricultural mentoring, there's all kinds of entry points into this project now. And being informed of the experience of the project, to me, is a vastly more valuable, there's potentially a vastly more valuable advocacy to really increase the engagement. So I'm hoping that we've reached that stage. Lastly, one last thought I wanted to say. Also, the CAC to me is an organism within an organism. It's not an attachment to a department. And I just don't know how, I'm really interested in anything we do capturing that, which may sound esoteric, but I don't mean it to be. But this is a little bit of a different model. This was, and I think that if we're going into a document, and if we're trying to do this, and I really think that people that want to learn more, about the National Western Center too, it's another shout out to you, Tanya. But don't have to wait for this report. That's one of the reasons that Tasha. It's one of the reasons that we've got the hard copies and we've got entry points and programs. So I hope people will still consider, even if we're saying that this is the next phase, that it's ongoing right now. Things are coming across the horizon. There are opportunities right now. So it's not like it's a stop and then start. And I hope whatever we do, it flows like that, basically. So anyway.
Any other comments, questions, queries, concerns? I've read enough things to say. Okay, perfect. If you guys have any other ones, you are more than welcome to email me at any time or give me a call. I'm always happy to, if you have anything that you forgot and you want to say to me, always happy to take that. I have the notes from this, and then hopefully we'll have kind of go forward and have more of a document sometime shortly. So, thank you.
You're in charge, Zach.
I am in charge.
Your
All right.
facilitator left.
Let's see if this thing is.
This one's on. You can use
Okay.
that.
All right. Next up is going to be the NWC Authority report. So actually, you're up again.
Okay. Brad apologizes that he isn't here tonight. We've had a long day. We started the morning with the Campus Services Committee of the National Western Center Board, then moved into a board meeting, then moved to some meetings downtown. And literally, I think we had probably 20 minutes in between everything. We were eating our lunch in the truck on the way downtown. So I do want to give you a quick update about some of the things, mostly the biggest thing that we talked about today at the meeting, and that is that our staff, which is 8 people, small but mighty, has been working very hard on the strategic implementation plan. Today, during executive session, we presented a draft of that plan to the board members. And we basically, it's a long document. It's about 29 pages long. I don't know. It's 176 pages long. It's a lot of pages.
But some of them are really pretty.
Are they?
Yeah, some of them are
So
really
John thinks they're pretty. I like it. Yeah, there are a lot of appendices. The meat of the document is about 72 pages or 79 pages, and then there are a lot of appendices. But I'll just give you a quick overview in that the SIP basically, I think what's happened over the past few months as more staff have come on and the National Western Center Authority, that piece that we've all come online, people are like, well, what does the authority do? And this document is, I think, it answers that question. It establishes and talks about the roles of the authority, the outcomes that we hope to achieve now and moving up to the opening of all of the buildings and substantial completion of the campus by 2023. And addresses our function areas, which are, and you've met some of the people and they've presented here. We have programs and programming and partnerships. We have campus operations. We have marketing and communications. We have real estate, and then internal operations. And those are the 5 areas that we did a deep dive into. And we basically laid out kind of what are the things that need to be done in each of those areas over the next 4 or 5 years in order to get the campus open and running and meeting the mission and vision of the National Western Center and all of the things that are in the master plan and the framework, and how does that all come together. So we did an overview of that for the board today in draft form. We're going to continue to discuss this with them and take their input, and then we will be most likely have a public version of this available in October that we will share with everybody. So that was one of the biggest focuses that we had today. Were there other things that we talked about, Liliana and John, that you wanted to highlight from the meeting today?
Energy.
Energy. Did we do that in? That was all in executive session as well.
That's right.
So, yep. So there are a number of items that it's always like this shroud of mystery when you go into an executive session, but. The reason that we do that is because oftentimes there are items that might be related to negotiations that we're having with different organizations, and so as those negotiations firm up, then those things will become public, and the board will make a final vote on those publicly, and then we'll be able to bring those to you. The other things that we've been doing and working toward at the authority is that battery looks like it's done. We've been setting up meetings with the new council members, and we've actually met with some of the holdover council members. The goal of those meetings really has been to just have a conversation, an overarching conversation about the National Western Center Authority, what we're looking to do in the next 4 or 5 years as the facility starts to open, and also to take input from those members about what's important to them in terms of the National Western Center. How do they want to engage community in addition to the CAC or in conjunction with the CAC? So the topics have been kind of broad and wide. The other thing that we've been participating in with the city is the triangle RFP process. I think maybe Tychus will talk a little more about that. We've just been there as a resource because what happens on the other half of the campus will have a great effect, and the National Western Center Authority will have a role in managing the entire campus, and so we've been spending a lot of time on that as well.
Liquor license.
The other thing that we talked about today is the liquor license, which is later on the agenda. I think we even have the city attorney staff here, so we can talk about that as well. So you're getting basically pretty much all the stuff tonight that we talked about today that was public information. If you have any other questions, happy to. Yep.
I want to mention the potential or possibility for connections to the World Expo.
Oh, yeah, so one of our board members is Steve McCarthy. And he has been working one of his projects that he's working on, we have the World Expo is coming up next year, is that correct? 2020. And so he did a short presentation for us this morning that he is working to put together the United States Expo space at the Expo, which is going to be in Dubai. And he mostly shared that he is struggling on the funding end of it. He is looking to raise an enormous amount of money, and normally they receive federal assistance in setting up the United States. I'd like to call it a booth, but it's not a booth. It's much grander than a booth, right? It's a pavilion. And it's a multi-layered pavilion. You know, it has a first floor where you can have, demonstration space. There would be space for a restaurant. And one of his ideas was to somehow connect the National Western Center and the National Western Stock Show to the pavilion through perhaps a restaurant and naming a steak after the National Western Stock Show and acknowledging the National Western Center in what he's trying to plan. So those are the opportunities that in the coming years that we're going to have. We're going to be able to reach out. We're going to develop those relationships, and we're really fortunate to have someone like Steve McCarthy on the board because he has amazing international connections. And we all talk about it, that we want to go from local to global, and he is one of those connections, and I think it's going to be really exciting as we move forward. So, any other questions? Yep, A. You might have to use this one.
I have a sort of a procedural question, first of all, on the strategic implementation plan. That document goes, maybe you could just elaborate a little bit on what exactly that is meant to implement. Because I think it's important for the CAC to understand what might issue from that. And I don't know if it's a matter of budget lines or, and if it's, there's been the continual question of when is the document going to come to the CAC for just, like the normal thing that happens.
Yeah.
And because you mentioned that it went in to executive session, and then it's going to be finalized, and then it'll, so can you clear that up a little bit?
So our process currently is that staff has put together this document. We have now, as of today, shared it with the board members. And as you can imagine, that's a lot to review. So we're going to give them, we want them to have time to review the document, give us their thoughts on the document. And what we discovered today, actually, it was interesting when we were talking to the board, AD, was that we see this, staff sees this as this all-encompassing document that sort of gives us this, it sort of gives us this roadmap and this path to ensure that when all of the buildings come online in 2023, that we've done all of the things necessary to have a campus that is operating, that we can maintain, that we have marketed, that we have raised awareness, that we have developed partnerships, and that we are ready to sort of be the keeper of the flame of the mission and vision as it applies to the campus, that we're coordinating with CSU and their programming, that we're engaging the other partners, that we're finding new partners. So we see it as this step-by-step process. It lays out the roles and our outcomes. It establishes our function areas, and then it goes even further. It says, okay, in our function areas, what are these things that we need to do? And then there's a whole other appendix that is basically work streams. It says, in order to get this job done, we need to do these 5 things, and here's the timeline. It's a Gantt chart that says, we're going to work from Q1 of 2020 to Q3, and then hopefully it'll be done by Q4. And so we go through just a long list in all of those areas. So it's very comprehensive. So what it's doing for the board is it's providing them, the board is our governance, and they set the policy, and then we will implement, and so their governance, and then Brad as the CEO will manage the process to achieve all of this whole plan that we've laid out. So we are working with the board now, and then as you know, we brought the programming update at the last meeting, right? Matt made the presentation on the basically the whole process that we did in terms of the programming the programming pieces and how they were, broken into different groups. And then there will be a point at which that we have to prioritize some of those things. So you can't do, 5,000 things or 500 things all at one time. So it will go to the board. The board will kind of give its stamp of approval, and then we will share. It will be a public document that will be shared with not only CAC, but other members in the community. It'll be available so that people, when they say, well, what does the National Western Center Authority do? That this document, we hope, will help to answer that question and lays out what our focus is moving forward. There's still some moving parts. There's the triangle development and, what will happen with that and how that will relate to our operations. But we're looking to move forward and know that we have certain steps that we have to meet so that we can go back to our board and say, you told us these are our basic policy areas. We're meeting those using our work streams in this document. So,
Liz, the meetings you had this summer, did they inform the strategic?
Yes, in a very big way. Yeah. So that's one of our function areas, programming and partnerships, and that whole process, the summit and then the summer of strategy, as they called it, was what informed the programming and partnerships section of the strategic implementation plan. But we also had to have everybody understand that it's not just programming and partnerships. It's that as buildings come online and as we get ready to open an entire campus in 2023, we have to have everything from toilet paper in the bathrooms to security systems to making sure that all the buildings are appropriately have heating and cooling, and that everybody that is getting everything that they need as we're booking events. We have to have a booking system. We have to be able to ticket. Now that doesn't mean that we're going to do all of that ourselves, but it means that we have that list of all the things that we know to make that picture right there a functional campus. And so that is what this document did. So we have campus operations. We have our own internal operations process that will address staffing and making sure that our staff are getting professional development and getting the things that they need to best accomplish all of the tasks that we have. There's a real estate component. Steve Nally, who's been on vacation for 2 weeks, and boy, have I missed him because I've been filling in for him at a lot of meetings. The National Western Center Authority attends all of the design and planning meetings for all of the buildings that are currently being designed on campus. And that's alongside the stock show, because the stock show has certain things that they want to accomplish in those buildings, but we also know those buildings have to have a function outside of the stock show. So we're making sure that as we look at the design and talk about spaces and equipment and all of those things, that we're looking out for the authority and making sure that those buildings can meet the needs of a myriad of events that will happen in those buildings. A livestock arena is great, and it's great for showing livestock, but it also can serve as an expo hall. A stockyard event center can be great for showing animals, but it could be a place where we could have a TED Talk at some point. So there are so many different functions that can happen in these, and so our real estate and Steve Nally attends all of those meetings to make sure that the authority is represented and that we're all working together to meet everybody's needs as we're moving forward. So there are a lot of functions beyond the big programming and partnerships piece. And we wanted to make sure in this document that we covered all of those so that everybody understood that the authority has a big job coming up. And we wanted everybody to understand that we know the gravity of that and that we're ready to move forward. So we're really excited about the document. Everybody's worked really hard on it. Yep.
So I appreciate that elaboration. One of the things this is unfolding an implementation of things that people can go and connect the dots in these conversations over the years and in the master plan, the flexibility of the buildings. We can have NWC talks, by the way. We don't have to default to the TED brand.
You're right. Good point.
Options. Let's protect our content here. But anyway, but I do, one little explanation point I want to put on is that the programming, this precedes, transcends, includes, and touches the summer, the Cultivate campaign and everything. The substantive history is very important, and going forward, there's a lot of flexibility in this document around programming. And that's and including what develops with the sums being greater than the parts with the partners. And that's one of the things I wanted to draw out, is that there's a lot of real rich engagement possibilities there with our partners like CSU, the museums, the city, and et cetera, and then the constituencies, the public schools, all kinds of things could happen. So I really want that to stay visible. And I really do feel like it's a really amazing acceleration forward for the operations and all these things to be like the mechanics are starting to show up. The gears are grinding there. Historically, I want to say one thing about this the World Expo, the World Expo. Early on, and I don't know if the meetings were being recorded at the time, but I want to ring the bell for the fact that from the very beginning, the World Expo, the science fairs, this was part of the vision of this project. This has been here from the beginning. And I'm always glad that we do have individuals. We have a phenomenally internationally connected stock show at the heart of this project. We've got a lot of I've been worried that it was going to be too international and too national and too fast, because that almost feels like the easiest part to me, because it's so exciting. But from the very beginning, the concept of innovation, intertwined solutions towards agriculture and what it's supposed to provide, and all of these kinds of things, and how to demonstrate to the world, how to draw the world together, has had that model. And I just want to make sure that we feel the depth of that in this discussion, with great appreciation for all the individuals that are going to help, that are going to come, for the next 100 years and now. I want people to feel that started in conversation out in these neighborhoods. So, just to ring that bell.
Thank you. Other questions, comments for Liz?
Just a question, and I think it might be answered here, but just the relationship between the authority and the Triangle and your real estate office, those connections, I'd like to understand that.
I'll say something and I'll let Tychus finish. But so the Triangle project is an RFP that will be issued by the City and County of Denver. But of course, we as the authority are very interested in how that is put together. And so we have been in an advisory capacity in the RFP process. But the authority is not issuing the RFP. It is a role of the city, and so we have been a partner in it. But there are certain things we can and can't do because we are not a city entity, and so we have been in advisory capacity. We've been sitting in on meetings. We've been offering insight about certain, certain components and different things. So, does that, Tychus?
Yeah,
I'll
that's
let
correct.
you elaborate any more.
That was great.
Okay.
Okay, so we are going to have Tychus do the NWC NUCO campus update.
Good evening, everyone. Tychus Holloway. Got a short update. Can everyone hear me? For you this evening, and just a reminder, these are the 16 assets that we've all agreed upon that were part of phases 1 and 2 of the Master Western Center development. We have technically four procurements that are still left. The majority of contracts have already been led by the city. This is not including Triangle, but we do still continue to have conversations about campus energy, and I think the authority board heard a little bit more about that today, so hopefully that comes to the CAC sometime in the near future. We also have the equestrian center and parking garage And that one, we're hoping to get going here pretty soon. We've got to take it to City Council for final approval, but that will set us into a good space for that equestrian center, which is a key part of the campus. Then we also have our last major contract to get together, which is the Livestock Center. We currently have a architect, planners, populace selected to take us through the design process for it. And then hopefully in the coming months, we'll have a procurement that will be out in the streets for the construction phase of the Livestock Center. So we're really excited about that, because then at least we have all the contracts let for the major construction items moving forward. So a couple updates here from that are updates from last month. If you'll see on the left side of your screen, we have two pretty significant demolitions that are underway, and one is on the Lake Mouton building, and the other is on the Double Barrel. I believe the Double Barrel is actually all the way down now. The Lake Mouton is coming down pretty quickly, and we'll be crushing the concrete and reusing as much as we can on site and elsewhere to continue with our renew goals. There are two upcoming road closures, and Marcy Loughran is here this evening if you have any additional questions on them. But in general, so at the top of the slide, this is along Race Court, and it's roughly between Franklin and the Brighton underpass, if you will, the Brighton Bridge, and over Race. And this is for some utility work, more so on Denver water side. And it'll last about 10 days, and Marcy's been contacting the businesses and talking to them in person about the routing that will need to happen to and from those businesses along Brighton and adjacent areas. And then the other one towards the right side of the screen is a partial road closure associated with some Excel energy-related work, and we believe that's going to be only about a half a day of a partial road closure, and it'll start around October 4th is what we're anticipating now. Marcy's got some materials that she started to develop that actually shows the specific locations, and again is talking to the businesses around there to make sure that they understand their access to and from the site and not to burden the community. A couple new images of the construction. So this is related to the rail that we keep talking about, that's DRIR, the Denver Rock Island Railroad relocation. And again, if you remember, there's rail tracks that are adjacent to the river. We're relocating those rail tracks to this location, and so what you're looking at is basically the corridor of the rail tracks that will come through the eastern side of the campus and not bisect the campus or be up near the river, which will actually allow us to then bury the Delgany wastewater lines and activate the riverfront, which I know was a key element of the master plan and the community advocacy for this project. Some other things that we're doing to help with support some of the concurrent activities that need to happen at the stock show. So these are some examples of the temporary hydrants that we for wash stations for cattle and livestock during that period. And here's an actual view of the Lake Mouton building that is starting to come down. So a period of history is now being removed from the campus so that we can add to the future with the equestrian center. Another view of it.
How old is that? Do you remember when it was built?
Ooh, trivia.
1926.
And then there be some trivia.
Yes.
Isn't there's a date on the very is it 26?
John, you were around then.
Yeah.
What year was that?
About as old as I am.
I want to say it's 1926.
We'll find out.
I bet we might be able to.
There's two ages.
Can you save
Right.
that?
Oh, there are.
Yeah.
But remember, there's that, and there's that big concrete year piece over on that side of it.
Okay. We'll find out.
Tribute game should be played at the social event.
Oh, that would be
Every
fun.
time you're wrong, you have to take
We're
it
prizes.
Yeah, and if you're
Absolutely.
wrong, you have to do this.
Sounds like a good time. And then lastly, just really briefly, so Patrick O'Keefe wasn't here this evening, so I was going to give a little bit of an update that there is no real update to this slide and information. The general plan is to still release a draft RFP in the fall of this year, so we're hoping in the coming months, and what that does is really start to allow the city to have a document out to the selected, to the proposers to start that selection process, and gives us a chance to really start to hone in on how well these proposals are meeting sort of the needs that we feel like we have shown through the master plan and throughout the community involvement that's happened. So I will say that there are a few things that we're making sure that are included in these discussions, and I know that the authority board has actually been with the subcommittee taking on the conversation around community benefits. And so we've been actively making sure that that material and conversation is presented in the RFP and materials to the proposers so that they're aware of those activities around the things that we would like to see as benefits to the community. And so we talked a little bit about it earlier today, but some of the general gist of small business utilization, workforce development for workers for the community, focused in on the GES community, but also the community at large. And so we'll see some of those things in the proposals, and we're really anxious to see how these proposals respond to some of our values and some of the things that you all have been saying for many years that you would like to see as part of the development. Clearly the 1909 building is one of those marquee things that where folks have said they wanted to have the public market. And so we'll see how the proposers start to piece together the puzzle for what the community has said that they wanted. We're currently working with the city's mayor's office as well as the project team to better understand the touch points with the community, including with this group in the coming months. So hopefully at the next meeting we'll actually have a real update on what that community engagement looks like throughout this iterative RFP process that the city's going to take us through. With that, I think that's it for me.
Question. There we go. Questions for Tychus?
Yeah. You mentioned community engagement for the Triangle RFPs. So that hasn't taken place yet?
So one meeting has actually occurred a few months ago, and so what we're now looking to do during the RFP process is additional community touch points so that we can try to present some materials that we can get back to the proposers and to have them react to some things and have community react to some things so that we can get the right touch points that are there.
Do you have some kind of distribution list to inform people? Okay.
Yeah, we will, but obviously if folks have additional people they would like to have and make sure they're on the distribution list, obviously we'll gather those and add them to it.
I think there's a
Triangle sign up sheet on our website, the www.nationalwesterncenter.com. So go to design and construction, and then when that pulls down, there is the future phases, the Triangle tab. Under there is a newsletter sign up, so make sure to sign up for that, and that is where a lot of distribution will go out. We'll probably already also send it under the general one as well, just to make sure we get everybody covered. But to be sure, do both.
And there's also on the city site a whole performance-based infrastructure page that also explains kind of the, not just this project, but what that means and the process in the city. So, and I think there's a sign up there as well.
Is that kind of new? Because I went on it recently and it wasn't very user-friendly.
I don't know, I manage the National West.
Which, on the PBI or the National Western
I
one?
tried to find the National Western one. When did that go live?
That's been live since, the Triangle piece.
Yeah.
That has been live since early last year. But we did, there has been some work done on the website as we are sharing it with the authority. So we have condensed
A lot of information under and collapsed it under the design and construction. And so I'm wondering if some of that has gotten lost in translation as we've been sharing the site. So what I will do is make sure to get Zach direct links to different signups and that he can push out to all of you. Or do you get the CAC web emails and texts and stuff? You got a lot of signing up to do.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so we'll get you all hooked up. If you have a phone, I can help you do it now. But we'll make sure that Zach gets that out specifically to everybody here.
Other questions for Tychus? All right, hold on.
I might be out of order, sorry. I just wanted to give a shout out. Marcy, and regarding the online stuff, I really encourage people, this can be added to the orientation as we go forward too. There is really good, Marcy worked on the website and a lot of things, it was by hook or by crook early on getting it going. And there are a lot of resources, and I have found this office to be incredibly responsive to changing mechanisms. So if you have feedback, it's been very proactive, to use, a jargon. But part of our job with the CAC is to help people get oriented to how you get the information. And there's been a lot of work done, so let's just build on it. So anyway, I'm sorry, it's kind of out of order, but I did that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tychus? Okay, next thing that we have on the agenda is the NWC Alcohol Common Area Bill with Brad Dotson and Miss Liz Adams.
I think it's just Brad and the city staff.
And city staff, I apologize.
John, did you have that bottle that you agreed for us to pass out?
I was going to bring it, but after what they said at the meeting this morning, I didn't.
Oh, shoot.
I didn't.
Yeah, we don't have an alcohol consumption area yet. While he's pulling that up,
They did talk about chugging 24 ounces.
so
October
Les
fest.
Moutons there's construction dates of 1922, 1929,
29.
and then I'm wondering if that Sheep Bridge was in 51, or there's some part of it that was in 1951. So, but 22, 29, and 51 it shows on the inventory listed on the nationalwesterncenter.com site in the historical inventory. There you go. Sorry.
All right, this seems like a fitting topic for the end of the day. Here to talk about an alcohol consumption area at the National Western Center. I'll introduce myself again, Brad Dotson, Deputy Director for the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center. And I'm joined by Erica Rogers, who's here from the city's Department of Excise and License. And before I move into what we'll be talking about, I want to acknowledge Liz Adams and the work that she has done on this, the work that Paul Andrews has done on this. And together, the campus partners have been working together over the last year and a half on alcohol consumption at the campus. And for both the present and in the future of the campus, we want to create an opportunity for multiple license holders to be able to sell alcohol on campus within a designated perimeter that allows for visitors to events, for consumers to be able to freely move between that area. And so we have been working on a regulatory environment both at the state and local level to enable that. And so we are grateful for the work that Erica and the Excise and Licenses team has been doing to make that happen. So I'll let Erica talk a little bit. I just covered this slide of kind of why we're here, but I'll let Erica talk a little bit about exactly what is in the ordinance that's being proposed.
Thank you, Brad. Hi, everybody. Like Brad said, I'm Erica Rogers. I'm a policy analyst with our Excise and License Department. We handle a lot of different license types here in Denver. All of the businesses that need a city-issued license, such as marijuana stores and centers, liquor licenses, food licenses, short-term rental licenses, and the list goes on and on, security guards, etc. So this is falling into the realm of similar to our other liquor licenses, which is why we're running the bill. So I always like to start a little bit with just an introduction of the basic concept of liquor licensing here in Colorado. The basic concept is that there needs to be a licensed premise if you're going to consume alcohol. That ties back to responsibility for what happens on that licensed premise. One of the rules about that licensed premise is that people who come onto the licensed premise, they can't bring outside alcohol onto the licensed premise. They have to purchase it there for consumption there. The other rule is that they can't purchase it there, consume some, and then leave with it. They have to finish it before they leave the licensed premise. This is probably a pretty familiar concept, as most of you have probably been to a bar or restaurant where they do not allow you to bring your own alcohol in. and they do not let you to take their alcohol off. So how did we get here? Earlier this year, the state legislature passed a bill that was signed into law on May 28th. Senate Bill 19200 expands the ability for patrons at the National Western Center to consume and carry their alcohol beverages outside of the specific liquor licenses of the businesses that are licensed to sell alcohol. However, to effectuate this change, the statute requires the City and County of Denver to pass an ordinance identifying when and where that consumption is allowed within the center. So specifically, what does that state law permit or prohibit? When and where authorized by the local ordinance, which would be Denver, the patrons of the National Western Center would be permitted to remove those alcohol beverages purchased at one of the licensed vendors. I'm going to use the stock show as an example because it has two vendors, K&M and Airmark. So if you're at an Airmark facility, you would be able to take your beverage from that Airmark facility. You'd be able to leave the premises of the Airmark facility and walk onto the premise of K&M. Last year, some of you might be aware that to avoid overlapping and avoid the bringing of beverages on and off each other's premise, there was a line in the tunnel where people had to make a choice whether to finish consuming their beverage or to get rid of it even though they had just purchased it, to follow that basic tenet of liquor law where they could not remove it from the first premise. There you go. So this law changes that. It says that that's no longer the case if you're at the National Western Center and if you follow the rules adopted by the local authority. However, it does mirror the traditional rules where instead of limiting it to the licensed premise, it expands it to the National Western Center, and it says that patrons may not bring outside alcohol onto the premise of the National Western Center, and they may not take either the beverages purchased from any of the vendors off of the National Western Center campus.
And so this new ordinance would apply to the entire campus, but on an event-by-event basis when there's been a designated perimeter established that covers multiple license holders. And so in doing so, we are accomplishing an operational need that exists today for how the stock show operates, but imagining a future in which there are multiple vendors on this campus and allowing patrons to freely move between multiple license holders across the campus. Erica, you want to talk about some of the requirements?
Sure. So with that state bill that provided these additional parameters, our partners at the National Western Center came to us and asked us to build out this framework. We will all work together with all the stakeholders. The City Attorney's Office was instrumental in guiding the development of the ordinance. So here are kind of the basics of what it will look like in the local law. Approval is required, so like Brad said, it would be an event-by-event basis that would need to have approval from the Director of Excise and Licenses. Just like other licenses need to have that approval by the Director for the license to be granted, these events would need to have approval from the Director to have that alcohol consumption in those common areas. The application would include a few specific things, including a site plan that tells us the boundaries, within the National Western Center, where is the area where you want people to be able to purchase and carry their beverages. It might not be the entire National Western Center. It might be different for each event. Some events might not even need this approval if they're going to be contained in one building with one liquor license. But if you're going to be taking advantage of it, you need to tell us where the boundaries are going to be. You have to also show that you have proof of possession or ownership of the area where you're proposing to be. We want to make sure that you're allowed to be there. You need to tell us the proposed dates and times so we know exactly when this area will be in effect. And we also want to see a security plan that shows us that you've really thought as an applicant about how you're going to ensure that that perimeter, wherever you've submitted, is going to be enforced so that people aren't bringing outside alcohol in and people aren't leaving with their drinks that they've purchased there. We do have sections for reasons that that application can be denied. These are pretty basic and mirror some of the restrictions that we have on many of our licenses in our licensing chapter. For example, if you do not propose adequate security for the area to show that you can't comply with those laws, you might be denied. Or if you don't have adequate barriers, or there's some other evidence that we have that some sort of approval of your event would adversely impact the health, safety, and welfare of the surrounding neighborhood. In those circumstances, we can also always take disciplinary actions, just like we could with a regular license. If somebody's got an event that's really going south, we can pull that approval. And we also outline what those unlawful acts are outside of, all of the other regular standing state and local laws. Our implementation timeline for this bill, so it's currently in draft form. We spent September doing community and city council outreach. And then next month we are going to continue that up until we go to the City Council Business Committee for where we'll be presenting the draft ordinance, and they'll be able to ask us questions. And then if that moves forward through the legislative process, we would ideally spend by the end of October making a notice of rulemaking through our department, excise and licenses, to fill out any additional administrative parameters that the ordinance requires. Finally finishing that up in November, and by December, if all goes well, we'll have application forms available for events starting in 2020.
Just in time for the 2020 session. So any questions for Erica or myself?
Questions? Hey,
That bill
Aaron.
that was passed by the state was specific to the National
Yeah.
Western?
Sorry.
So the bill that was passed by the state legislature was specific to National Western?
Yes, it was. And the section that it was in, it kind of makes a comparison between the functionality of the National Western Center and the State Fairgrounds, for example, which is also called out specifically in that section of the statutes.
Can I just say one thing just quickly? So, and it was actually the stock show and their lobbyists that went to the legislature and said, hey, we need a mechanism so that when there are 2 licensed liquor premises, that we're not asking people to dump their alcohol. And it took literally, it was almost a year-long process, but the state director of excise and license, he was the one that sat down with us and said, here's what I think the answer is. There are lots of other things that are happening in terms of the alcohol consumption areas, but this one specifically, we could compare ourselves to the stock show because it's to the state fair because it's a complex. And so at the state fair, people are allowed to purchase a beer here and walk over here, and get their turkey leg and move around with the beer and not be confined to a specific area. So that was why the state liquor director suggested to the stock show that there be, an amendment to state law that would then allow the city to create a situation here on the campus. And if I could just say from the authority perspective, this is the immediate need was to make it so that people do not have to dump their beer before they walk through that tunnel. Or drink it really fast, or chug a 24-ounce beer. But the flexibility that this gives us, and I know that Brad already said it, but our focus is that we want to be able to be kind of forward-looking in terms of concessions, and not necessarily have always one concessionaire that maybe we would have, we want to be able to have local people. We just want to be able to have that flexibility that if we have 2 licensed liquor premises, that you can move around those and move around the campus. And so this is fantastic this was a great, it's a great show of teamwork. We all said, there's this issue, let's all get together and figure out how to come up with a solution. So we are so excited about it. And if Paul Andrews were here, he would tell you how excited he is too. He told everybody today at the board meeting. So, yep.
And to kind of piggyback off of what Liz said, when we were working on what this ordinance would look like in Denver to effectuate the change for the National Western Center. We were thinking of the stock show as the prominent event that everyone knows about, but we were also working together to craft something that would really work with what the community goals were for this space and for this campus. And some of the questions that we've heard from community members and how to make this campus something that works for everybody. And have that flexibility, like Liz says, to do different kinds of events with different organizational features than maybe the stock show. So we really saw it as an opportunity to make this space achieve, have it achieve more potential.
Were there, given that this is well, first of all, I think this is really exciting. And given that this is a PK through 12 educational project, were there any special considerations that were successfully dealt with relative to making this possible? Is that no limitation? I'm trying to ask a question without creating a problem, because I
Sure.
you know what I'm saying? Then I have another quick question.
So if I'm understanding, I'm hearing that maybe there's a concern about children and exposure to alcohol consumption. That's something that we're very cognizant about, and obviously one of the reasons we were interested in having that site and security plan. One of the other huge liquor laws that will have to be enforcing is that no sales to underage children are made. Also, specifically when it comes to the event by event basis piece of it, if it's an educational K through 12 only event, we're not sure. I mean, it would be odd, I think, for somebody to apply for this type of approval for that sort of an event. But I think the event by event basis gives us the flexibility to kind of look at each event in its specifics to say, is this plan good for this event, whereas it might not be good for another event.
Okay. And then just real quick, is this at all a derivative or favorably affected by the entertainment district situation that's evolved around the city?
So that is a excellent and common question. I'm going to get, are you referring to the state statutory use of entertainment district? Yes. So for those of you that don't know, there is another state statute that was passed in 2011 that allows localities to create what are called entertainment districts. And within those entertainment districts, there are certain density requirements that I won't go into, but it allows liquor licensees within that area to band together, to form a promotional association, and to have what's called a common consumption area. This is not that. This is totally separate, although there are some commonalities in that in both. Patrons may carry their drinks in locations that otherwise they would not be able to under state law. So that is a question we have gotten quite a bit, and we do anticipate, but if anyone wants to get into the nitty-gritty, I'm happy to talk to you afterward, but this is a totally separate program.
Good to know. Thank you.
You're right on my thinking. I think just because of the number of events that we're going to be having at this site, I mean, we talk all the time about this being a 24/7, 365 space, and how we want it to be activated every single day of the week, every day of the year. So it seems like this should be an entertainment district so that you don't have to have every individual event constantly applying for a permit. It should just always happen.
It's too big.
So it doesn't fit within the statutory parameters of what can be an entertainment district, because I think that was something that the stock show explored previously, which is why the legislative fix that SB 200 created was the route that they went.
That's unfortunate. What about the open space, the green space along the river? That's not an actual city park, is it?
It is not an actual city park.
Part of the campus.
Correct. Now, as the stock show operates today, they do not include that area within their perimeter. Obviously, there would be flexibility with this, that perimeter could change in the future, and certainly with a redeveloped campus, that perimeter will change. But it really depends event by event basis of what's within that perimeter that the stock show would host their event.
So I think generally, I think the public has an understanding of what is allowed in terms of alcohol in city parks, and that you can bring your own alcohol into city parks. And so that is going to have to be something that is made very clear to people who are just coming to spend time by the river, now that we're opening up all of this river access, and making sure that people are not unintentionally violating bringing their own alcohol onto a common consumption area.
And one of the application requirements is, as part of that site plan that shows where your barriers are, you have to show what kind of barriers those are going to be, what kind of signage you're going to have, how easy is it for somebody to get confused. Those are all things we will consider in issuing the approval. It'll probably function a lot like how we work with other applicants. We won't outright deny them right away, but we can say, hey, this may not be sufficient. What we'd like to see is a little bit more XYZ, and if the applicant is amenable to that and agrees to that, then the application could be approved. And another just clarifying point too, Carrie, so each, for example, like the stock show, each day of the event wouldn't need to submit an additional approval. It would be for that one event.
But, so Carrie, point well taken. I think that's something that we at the authority need to put on our list, because here's the thing, you just brought up a whole other ball of wax, because this is about specific events and having a secured premise and event and moving around. That we're going to have to, I think that's something that we're just going to have to talk about. That riverfront is National Western Center Authority property, city property.
That's correct.
And so what about alcohol consumption? So I think that's, you just added something to our list, I think, because.
Sorry.
No, but I mean, because this is some, I mean, I think you just brought up a really good thing that I don't think we had even thought about. This is addressing events and applications for events and the ability for people to move around during events. But what about that, our whole concept that we want this to be open space available to people all the time, that people are going to be coming on and off, and how do we deal with that? So that's a really good question.
And the other thing to think about events too is that you're going to have events starting and ending at different times, right? I mean, you're going to have, let's say during the stock show, that's the only event that's happening on the campus. But during other times of the year, you're going to have multiple events that some are a single day, some are a week. You're going to have others that are 2 and 3 days, and they overlap by a portion of that time. And so how do you create a common area for multiple different events that have multiple different start dates, end dates, if they want to partake in something like this? I think it's just something to be really aware of.
Yep.
And that is something we consider too. For example, when we issue other like special event liquor permits, I'll let Reggie talk to you because I think he's got some good feedback. But you know, doing a capacity analysis of what is a feasible and realistic expectation for the number of events that can happen simultaneously that will be using the common space. It's also good to keep in mind that if the event is entirely contained within one building and with one licensed premise, it would not need to seek this approval.
Yeah, that's correct. And then on the issue with the open space, what this new approval would allow for is you wouldn't be able to bring any alcohol into the area that's been approved as an approved consumption area. So if the open space that you guys are talking about is not within the area that's been approved, you could do whatever you want to do on that open space. Making sure that open space is also not a public area in which you would not be able to consume alcohol pursuant to state law. So I'm not sure about that.
That's a good point.
If it's a city park, then that'd be fine. But if the approved consumption area does include that open space, then you wouldn't be able to bring your own alcohol onto the approved consumption area. So it would depend on how whoever's applying would like this new approval draws that space out, right?
Thank you for bringing that up.
It's my understanding that the riverfront area is not a public park. It belongs to us, the National Western Center Authority.
So then there's no.
And as a member of that authority, I would become very protective about that area. And don't mess with my beer garden that's going to go in down there. I think this is a question that would have to be addressed later in some discussion at the authority. We've got some time yet. But the best news is that it's exciting that it's going to happen. So we'll take whatever we can, inch at a time or a whole mile. But you know, we're on it and getting it going. Thank you.
Hey, those barriers that have to go on the plan, so, you know, to how easy it is for people to get confused one area to the next, is that calibrated with sober, or is there a scale of numbers of drinks going up? How do they do that?
All applications will be considered in their entirety.
Good answer.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, and if you think of any others, you can pass them to Liz, who can then pass them on to Reggie and I, and we will make sure that they're considered. You know, we're happy to hear any community feedback that you have, especially as it sinks in and you might think of something later.
Thank you. All right, last thing on the agenda, we have community reports and public comment. Any from anyone? All right.
I see purses wrapping up and briefcases, so I'll try and be quick. Again, on Lance Nading, I'm the managing member of the corner of 47th and Brighton Boulevard, future home of the Denver Police Museum. That invokes a lot of, museum. What is a museum? Really what it is community outreach based on tenets of things like education, mental health. Really, it's, of course it serves the benefit of a museum, but it's really about community engagement. We're about community engagement. National Western Center is about community engagement. I'll try and be brief. I was at the City Council, the last read for the rezone, and there was public comment. I was one of the people that spoke in favor, obviously very much in favor. Very self-serving for the corner that I manage, and then also I just love the whole thing. And I thought the positive comments were good. I don't think there was any negative actually. But when National Western presented, quasi-governmental agency of Denver, the council members and Council seat of Baca being one of them, asked some pretty hard, some pretty basic, somewhat obvious but hard questions related to how National Western, has implemented the long-term vision and goals in the spirit of the most recent updated Blueprint Denver, and that was about equity and inclusion, which obviously we're about. And I felt like those were questions that the presenters weren't prepared to answer. And I was embarrassed for them. And I felt like, wow, even to the point where one of the council members, not Sita Baca, but another council member, I can't remember his name offhand, said, well, suppose we table this motion. Suppose we table this and revisit this notion of equity and inclusion as we've worked very hard in Blueprint Denver to make very important values of our future. And then one of our city attorneys spoke to that and said, well, if you do that, we won't be back here for another year. So I thought that was very, very embarrassingly poor planning on the National Western Center's part. And here's the thing, it was totally inadvertent. I mean, I felt bad for them, but I thought, yeah, it's kind of obvious. So my point of all this discussion is that the CAC has to be more than just a group of people that are checking a box. And I have fresh eyes. I'm very new to this, so forgive. The last thing I want to do is be offensive in any way. But I think it's important to realize that the role of, in my opinion, the CAC has to really be a role that is valuable and required for the overall long-term strength of the National Western and its acceptance by all the stakeholders around it. So things like equity and inclusion, whatever that means to the neighborhoods surrounding the registered neighborhood organizations on the greater Metro Denver, or the Denver landscape, and then how that relates to the CAC, have to be more strategically developed in a way with mission and purpose, other than, I feel like the meetings I have attended, the CAC sort of is part of the discussion and sort of chimes in and has viewpoints. But I think it has to be more than that. I think it has to be more than that. I think it has to be real, thoughtful, mission and purpose that in the end validates a better National Western, particularly with the triangle coming up over the next 2 years. Like, what do we want that to be? How does that benefit the community in a meaningful way with regard to outreach, education, mental health, ADA equity, all those things. So again, just maybe I'm naive, to what's already been done and what's planned to be done. But I thought that was a really key example of where that could have been executed in a much more effective way at City Council two Mondays ago. So thanks for letting me speak. Thank you.
All right. All right, AD.
I'd like to respond a little bit to, what's your name again? Lance?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you were here, I can't remember. There was really a good discussion and a strong welcome to the Police Museum early on when the idea came up. And part of it was, and there's people in the room, John B. one that can speak more to this than I can, certainly. But the possibility of really confronting the relationship with the police and what this has meant to the neighborhoods. It was a very over lifetimes and cultures and all kinds of things, very friendly, very inclusive, very forthright come to Jesus conversation. And I want to say that the relationship of the CAC has been very declarative in the context of what this means coming into a neighborhood. And I was at the City Council meeting that you were referencing to. And I have a very different impression than you do of what transpired in that conversation, so I'd like to offer the counterpoint. I feel like the issues of equity and inclusivity are incredibly important and are reflected. I felt that the questions were too simplistic. And afterwards I said to the group that inclusivity and equity is a process, it's not just a zoning issue. And so I want to offer the counterpoint. I was not embarrassed at all by the presentation. I thought that there was opportunity to be clear at making the connections about what is the process, all the sums of the working parts of policy, engagement, planning, and implementation that cause and that commit to and bring about equity. And so I felt like I was embarrassed. I thought that these were very good presentations. I felt that it was a matter of maybe having more of a unifying language to help people understand the full process of how equity is created. It is not just a simple thing. I've never seen and have not experienced the CAC ever to be a checklist group. I think that this group has challenged things and brought to the language of this project things that are coming into the spirit of all these things in a way that is very exciting and that creates a lot of the entry points with the equities and that kind of thing. And clearly the word has to get out more and clearly more people have to be engaged. But I just want to offer that with appreciation for what you're doing, but on behalf of what I think the more filled out impression is of what that dynamic is, my point of view and my engagement over the years and looking at those issues, I would say that the complexities needed to be expressed more, but I don't think it was a lack of preparation. I think the preparation has been in the process leading up to it on many fronts, so that it'll prove out that we have mechanisms that can create that type of equity and engagement and that kind of thing going forward, and certainly in relationship to the museum. So let us know more about your fundraising as it happens, okay?
All right, unless there's anyone else, we are going to stand adjourned.
Wait, I have one last, I'm sorry, and I know you guys, but I have to do it with Liliana, since she's talked about leaving the board. I want to say that, I have been very amazed at you and at Liliana for what she's brought to this project, and there's attributes that she has on the advisory, on the board, the board of the board, the authority board, that I hope that we can see as a legacy that we need to. This is a woman whose life is education, who deals in early childhood, who helps people become teachers, who has a constant awareness of this in her sensitivities from within the constituency of neighborhoods. And we don't have enough, in my opinion, it's my opinion, of that essential awareness on the authority board quite yet. And I hope as we suggest people to Liliana and the board that we consider that as so important. I hope that we think about what it means to be an advocate for this project. I hope that we can get people that are involved in these this comprehensive understanding of what we have to do from the very beginning of a life all the way through, because that's what it's all about. So I just want to say thank you, and I just really want people to be able to keep your echo going there. So I just wanted to say that so we can take that.
All right, thank you, everyone. We will stand adjourned.